Hello, virtual educators. It's me, Kelly Austin, and on this video, I'm going to discuss with you or explain to you the importance of training students on the LTVD procedures. This is one of the most important things that you can learn from this whole process. So now that you know all the steps and you've gotten down to this module, I really want to emphasize this video. So please make sure you are not distracted and that you take notes and that you take this part very seriously, because this part is going to determine how successful the LTVD process is implemented in your classroom. All right, so the significance of the system. Now, you know that the LTVD requires you to your students to go through 8 steps. It is a systematic process. Okay, and every course that I teach has a systematic process, and let me tell you why. This is what I have learned from implementing systematic instruction in all of my online courses. Okay, and even when I taught, not even just online, but even when I taught first and second grade, and when I was a curriculum facilitator and I did professional development, everything that I did ran by a system. And why is that? Because a system gives people a standard. The system provides the archetype of what is expected. There's no confusion about what you as an instructor expect for them to do when they are in class and when they're meeting with each other. There's no, you know how students used to get together and study in the library and everybody's talking and there's a bunch of confusion. I never liked studying with groups because of that. There's none of that because they're very clear-cut steps, and the students know exactly what they're supposed to be doing during those steps. So it provides the archetype of what is expected. Then it also, that standard gives students a scale by which to measure their performance. So they can actually, when they get to the end and they're doing their reflection form and they have to actually talk about what they did well and what the areas that they need to improve in, they are able to do that because of the standard you have set, that they know exactly what they were supposed to be doing for every single step. All right, performance enhancement. When you have a standard, or not a standard, but a system, it forces students to think about the process and how it can be improved consistently. And this follows up with that standard. So as they're talking about and thinking about what they did well and what they need to do better, it forces them to really think about all of the components of the process. And as they think about those components and constructively critique each other and themselves, they can become better. And last but not least, a system makes the instruction self-sufficient. This is how student ownership comes into play. I can own my learning when I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So it eliminates the confusion and it builds confidence. And the students work systematically without the need for constant support from you. They can support each other. There's somebody in that group that's better at something than another person. And so through that cooperative learning structure, they are able to support each other as they go through the system, as they follow the system without having to have constant support from the instructor. All right, let's talk about what happens at the beginning of this training and what you want to enforce and remind and encourage for what is supposed to happen at the beginning of the LTD process. Okay, you want students to know that it's important for them to get to class early. Their mindset has to be that they know that you expect them to get there early. So if your session begins at 6:30, then they should expect to get to class around 6:15. Why? Because they can have technical difficulties. Why? Because they may want to get a snack or get their water or get situated. But once we start at 6:30 or whatever time your session is going to start, we are ready to start. We're going to move like like locomotion, through the 8 steps. And so we want you to prepare before you get to class. Okay, so this is different from face-to-face preparation probably, but in with this online preparation, we want you to make sure that you have everything that you need, any documents that you need, that you've pulled up your template, that your computer, everything is configured, you've downloaded your software, everything's running smoothly. So you want them to understand the importance of getting to class early. The login procedure. You want to train students on the login procedure. So if that's you having an instructional video where you show them how to log in, how to access their group, or if there's a Blackboard tutorial that you can find, or Canvas, or whatever LMS system that you're using that shows them, I find that creating my own instructional video that shows them my course shell, the class that they are actually taking at that time, eliminates confusion because they can actually see. And I actually show them in my instructional video how to log in. Now, this is if your students have to log in from outside of the course shell, as we talked about in the previous module. If they have to log in from a link that you give them that comes from Blackboard Collaborate, in my video, I show them how that looks through Google Chrome, and I show them how that looks through Internet Explorer, because it looks differently when they log in. However, if the Blackboard Collaborate or your session is actually embedded within your course, you don't have to do that. But I would create a video. The research has shown that students in online courses feel more connected to their instructor when the instructor is actually in the video, when the instructor's voice, the person is actually teaching them, is in the video. So create videos that show the students how to log in, what that procedure is. Trust me, it will eliminate any confusion and keep people out of your inbox. All right, you want to emphasize to them the importance of reading the whiteboard announcements. Now, all of this that I'm sharing with you here is what you can communicate to them via your announcement page. Okay, is what you can communicate to them via instructional videos that you provide, but you want them to always read the whiteboard announcements. When they enter the session, you should have a message up there greeting them. Good evening, Group 1. Okay, I hope you've had an awesome day, a fulfilling day, a productive day. And then you continue with just some quick encouragement about the session. If there's any tips or things that you noticed from the previous session, then you can include that. Please remember to stick to your time frames or whatever that group might have been struggling with. If there was a question that was posed to you via the minutes that the reporter had submitted to you, this is the time where you can address it on the whiteboard announcement if you didn't already address it in an email. So, it's up to you. You'll know your students and what you should post on the whiteboard, but always have an announcement on there when the first person enters the session. So what I do is, if my session begins at 6:30, I'm always logged in by 6 o'clock, sometimes earlier, but by 6 o'clock I have my announcement up. So if there's any new, or early birds, that they will see that announcement. Okay, and I look so prepared. All right, you want to teach your students that you post the group roles. The procedure is that the first person to enter the session posts the group roles on the whiteboard. The first person to enter the session. And so I tell them, do not enter the session and then click on away and then be gone for 10 minutes. If you're not ready to walk into the session, walk into the class and write on that whiteboard, then don't enter the session yet, because I am expecting you as the first person to write on that whiteboard the group roles. Now, the first time they meet, the group roles will just have the list of roles on the left, and students will volunteer as they come in. But once those roles are established, the first person who enters is going to put group leader Kelly Austin, timekeeper Susie May, reporter Jane Smith. They're going to put the names of the actual people who have volunteered for those roles during their first session. Remember, you want the roles to remain the same at least for the month if you're doing it by individual sessions. Okay, you want them to practice it for that whole month so that they can become skilled at it. If you're doing units, as I teach you to do thematic units, then you want them to stay the same for the entire unit. Okay, so the first person to enter the session posts the group roles. They do not begin the session without those roles being posted. And the reason you have them do that is because it's a reminder to everyone who's responsible for what. And also, as individuals come in, a minute or two before the session starts, if someone is absent, then substitutions can take place. They need to take care of that before the session starts. There does not need to be conversation at the end of the session about who's going to do, oh, so and so never showed up. Who's going to be the reporter? We need a reporter, y'all. We need a reporter, because at the end of the session, everybody's ready to go. You don't want to have all that long, lengthy discussion. This needs to be taken care of in the beginning. All right, a mic check. The group leader needs to have a mic check at the beginning. Just because people's names are in the chat box does not mean that they are in the session. So you want them to go through the mic check and call that person's name or tell them to go down the list according to the names in the chat box and speak and greet the class so that we know everybody's microphone is working. All right, what happens in the middle in terms of training? In the middle of this, you want them to understand that they are to respond to each step in order of the names in the chat box. They're either going to go from top to bottom or bottom to top. Some of my groups will go top to bottom for vocabulary and bottom to top for the next step and top to bottom. The group leader can manage that so that the same person doesn't have to go first the whole time. Or they might like it that way. Every group is flexible. But the reason why you set this into the system is because you don't have to worry about saying, oh, Jonathan, you never gave your vocabulary words. Have we heard from everybody? That kind of thing. You can see that, okay, we go in this order. It's systematic, the order in which we respond. Okay? All right, next. Follow the steps sequentially. I've had groups that I had to go back and I'm like, how did you all get to step number 5 already? You already did your outline? You already, because I'm going in between groups and I'll scroll up and see that they skipped and said, well, we'll come back to that one. No, sir. No, ma'am. No, thank you. They must follow the steps. Why? Because it is a system. And once they learn the system, okay, without straying to the left, straying to the right, that's when it's going to flow. That's when they're going to have ownership, and that's when confusion is eliminated. Do not skip steps. You have to emphasize that with your students. They must go in order. Okay, you also want to emphasize to them to be mindful of the time frames that are established for each step. Now, mindful just means that they are privy to it, they're cognizant of it, but they don't have to stick to it like, oh my gosh, we're going 5 minutes over with vocabulary. Remember, again, it depends on the length of the article or the chapter. Clearly, if they're doing a textbook chapter, it's going to take them longer to do some steps than if they read a short 8-page article. Okay, so the time frames give them a boundary, but they're not bound by them. But they still want to be mindful because they want to get through all 8 steps before the session ends. All right, provide support for each other. You want them to understand that this is not just, okay, a race to the finish. I've had groups where they're just trying to get through the 8 steps really fast. No, ma'am, no, sir, that's not what we're here for. We're here to learn through virtual discussion. And so let's say a student's vocabulary and their example is not quite up to par. That's when the students need to support each other and say, well, what exactly did you mean by that? Or can you think of another example? Or that example is good, but can an example that doesn't actually use the word in the example but kind of gives us more of an idea of what that word means? or when they get to making connections between a resource from the course and what they're actually reading, maybe that person didn't make that bridge like they should have between those two things. And when they didn't make that bridge, then another student can say, but how does that article relate to this article that we're reading now? What concept, can you think of that actually relates to this article that we're reading now? So you want to encourage them that this is a experience in which they support each other. It is cooperative learning, so it is the benefit of everyone that everyone understands and everyone does their best. All right, so then now at the end, what is expected? The group leader is going to share announcements regarding what are we reading the next time that we meet. I mean, what are we discussing the next time that we meet. So the group leader is going to go over what they're to read next. The group leader might also mention any class assignments that are due. Maybe that night it might be an assignment due, or that Sunday, whenever your due dates are. In my classes, most of the assignments, because we meet actually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So on Wednesday night, for example, an assignment will be due at 11 p.m. on Wednesday night. Your assignments might be due on Sunday nights, or whenever your assignments are due. So the group leader is just going to kind of remind students about any assignments that are coming up. The group member should share questions or concerns at the end. Why? Because the reporter is going to include those in the minutes if they're for me or for you, the instructor. If they want to ask questions of each other about things or concerns, then they're going to share that at this time as well. And also, the group leader is going to remind group members of their responsibilities. So let's get into these responsibilities. There's a publication process because the students are creating a document. They have created a document together while they were in class, and that document is going to be graded. And we talked about that in the previous module, how important it is for you to have a grade associated with this document and also points associated with their class participation. So we have the reporter, the reflector, the whiteboard technician, the editor, and the publisher. 5 key roles in the publication process for this editor's template. Okay, and so let's talk about what those roles are. Now, the reporter, once again, and we've gone over this before, but I want you to make sure that you have them stick to this. For example, the reporter is supposed to email minutes to the instructor and then upload them to the file exchange. If I don't get an email from all the reporters, I go back to that group page and I email the whole group and say, I have not received the minutes for this group. Please email them to me as soon as possible. They're supposed to be emailed by 10 p.m. in my class. So I'll say, please, I need them the day of the session. I need them that night, okay? Not tomorrow, not over the weekend. So I email them if I don't receive them. The reporter emails the minutes to the instructor. These are the things that the group leader is going to remind the group of at the end. The reflector is going to upload the reflection form to the file exchange. Okay? The whiteboard tech, the person who was copy and pasting everything onto the document, is going to upload the rough draft of the document to the file exchange. The whiteboard tech is going to upload when? That same night that you have class, not the next day or the next day. Okay? And you have to reinforce and you have to remind and you have to hold them to this. Okay, this is what you're doing the first 3 weeks. You are really on them about these procedures and these processes. All right, then the editor is going to upload the final draft to a designated place. Now, remember, I used to use the file exchange for this as well, but the file exchange over time gets a little crowded. This is fine at the beginning, and I've used it for years, and so they can do that. But I just decided to create a group discussion board to give them access to their discussion board and to put the final drafts there. So it's up to you whether you want to create a wiki, a group wiki. You don't create it, you actually just click on it within your learning management system. You can put some note like, please place final drafts here, but the editor wants to put the final draft in a designated place. And finally, the publisher is the person who's going to submit that final draft to be graded. Okay, so my students do a unit, remember. The publisher puts all those documents, all the editor's templates and reflection forms into one little booklet and submits it to me on the main discussion board where the whole class can see it. All right, so that is those are some tips that I would strongly encourage you to follow. I want you to understand how important it is for you to invest in training your students on the system. When I taught elementary school, I spent 6 weeks training my students on the systems and procedures. How do you go to the bathroom? What do you do, in the morning when you come in for your morning work? I had a work sequence that they did in the morning when they first walked in the door. And they could just go right through it in 2nd grade without any assistance from an adult. Now, I was in the room, of course, that they needed some support, but they took pride in not needing any support and being self-sufficient. So it is the same thing with adult students. If you invest in training your students on the system, the same way Chick-fil-A does, the same way McDonald's does, the same way any company does with their business, it's going to pay off. So spend that time. It might seem like it, and I'm telling you, at the end of the session, whether it's 8 weeks, 12 weeks, a semester, the students will look back and be like, oh my goodness, remember the first session we had? We didn't know what in the world we were doing, and now we just can, they own it. Okay? Take the 3 weeks to be a very present help in the time of trouble. Take the 3 weeks to be there for your students. You will not regret it. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one as I teach you how to facilitate the LTVD process.